He called Colonel Mitchell's legacy a liability on the battlefield. But what the 75-year-old veteran did next wasn't just a response. It was a lesson written in silence, dignity, and decades of forgotten wisdom that no modern combat manual could teach. The National Veterans Memorial Hall wasn't just hosting an event. It was witnessing a pilgrimage. Inside the grand auditorium, veterans from every conflict gathered under the weight of shared sacrifice. Banners from different service branches hung like battle flags, while spotlights illuminated the demonstration area at the center. Richard Blackwood commanded attention as he strode onto the platform. At 40, the elite combat instructor's physique was a sculpted testament to modern military fitness. Broad shoulders stretching his tactical shirt. Not a single movement wasted as he adjusted the microphone. The Special Forces patch on his sleeve gleamed under the lights, his voice confident and sharp. In the third row sat Walter Coleman, a 75-year-old retired soldier almost invisible in his simplicity. His hunched frame seemed frail under a weathered service jacket too big for his diminished frame. White wisps of hair clung to his spotted scalp, hands gnarled and trembling slightly on the walking cane between his knees. The small Medal of Honor pin on his lapel caught no light, demanded no attention, just like the man who wore it. The audience quieted. The cameras focused. Blackwood smiled. "Let's be honest," Blackwood began, pacing with predatory grace. "We gather to honor warriors, real warriors, men who've adapted to modern combat realities, not those clinging to outdated tactics that get soldiers killed." A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd. Blackwood continued, his confidence growing with each step. "Take Colonel James Mitchell's combat system," he said, gesturing dismissively. "Revered, yes. Legendary, perhaps. But practical? Not anymore." He demonstrated a quick sequence of modern strikes. Mitchell's methods were developed for a different era, a slower, more forgiving battlefield. Walter's weathered face remained impassive. Only the slight tightening around his cloudy eyes betrayed any reaction. His gnarled fingers remained perfectly still on his cane. Blackwood's voice hardened. "I've reviewed the tapes of Mitchell's instruction, the so-called master tactician behind half our military's old combat manuals." He made air quotes around the word master. Laughter rippled to the younger attendees. The insult had landed. Mitchell taught techniques that, frankly, would get you killed today. He was good at training for yesterday's wars, not tomorrow's battles. In the third row, Walter Coleman sat motionless. His breathing didn't quicken, his expression didn't change. But those who truly understood combat would have noticed something shift in the old man's stillness, not tension, but focus, the kind that precedes action. Blackwood wasn't finished. His smile widened, feeding off the growing tension. Can anyone honestly say Mitchell's combat doctrine serves modern soldiers? He scanned the crowd, eyes deliberately passing over the older veterans. Those techniques might look good in old training films, but they're museum pieces now, just like the men who still believe in them. The moderator shifted uncomfortably. Several decorated veterans exchanged glances. The atmosphere grew heavy with unspoken objections. "Mitchell never faced a day's threats," Blackwood continued, voice dropping to a theatrical growl. "He trained for a world that no longer exists. His students," he paused, eyes deliberately finding Walter's hunched form, "are walking relics, teaching reflexes that will get our boys killed overseas." Walter's age-spotted hands remained perfectly still, but something flickered behind his rheumy eyes. Not anger, something colder, more deliberate. Blackwood approached the edge of the stage, looking directly at Walter now. "In fact, I think it's time we stop confusing nostalgia with tactical reality." The moderator attempted to intervene. "Perhaps we should focus on honoring all generations of—" "I'm not finished." Blackwood cut him off without looking away from Walter. "These old-timers sit in their rocking chairs telling war stories, while the rest of us adapt to actual combat. Their medals don't make their methods relevant." Several audience members looked down. Others glanced toward Walter, whose stillness had become something different. Not weakness, but the calm of a weathered stone that has endured countless storms. The silence stretched, electric and dangerous. Something was about to break. Blackwood pointed directly at Walter, voice dripping with challenge. Take this gentleman. A student of Mitchell's, I believe. Tell me, sir, how many of your comrades died because of those outdated tactics? How many more would die if we still taught them today? The moderator stood halfway out of his chair. Mr. Blackwood, that's entirely. If Mitchell's ghost is watching, Blackwood interrupted, smirk widening. Tell him come shut me up. The room froze. Every breath held. Even the lights seemed to dim for a heartbeat. Then Walter Coleman moved. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just inevitably, like a eroded stone finally shifting after centuries of patience. His arthritic hands gripped the cane, pressing it into the floor as he slowly, painfully rose to his full height. Still bent, still frail, still unassuming. The audience watched in uncomfortable silence as he made his way toward the demonstration area, each step deliberate, his cane tapping a soft rhythm on the polished floor. The hunched shoulders, the thinning white hair, the weathered jacket hanging from his diminished frame. He seemed to embody fragility itself. Yet something in his movement made the room hold its breath. Not his speed, not his strength, his purpose. Blackwood's smile faltered just slightly. Walter reached the demonstration area's edge, placing his cane carefully against the wall before stepping onto the mat. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a man conserving every ounce of energy. Standing in the center, his posture remained stooped, his arms hanging loosely at his sides. Blackwood jumped down from the stage with athletic grace, landing with a theatrical bounce that drew a few nervous chuckles from his supporters. He approached the old man with performer's confidence, circling slowly. Well, he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. Looks like we're having a practical demonstration after all. He rolled his shoulders, grinning at the audience. Don't worry, sir, I'll be gentle. We have medics standing by. Walter said nothing. His rheumy eyes tracked Blackwood without emotion, without fear, just quiet assessment. Let's see what the old school has to offer, Blackwood said, assuming a modern combat stance. He began with a simple feint, a probing jab thrown intentionally wide. Not meant to hit, just to test the old man's reactions. Walter didn't flinch, didn't raise his hands, didn't shift his weight. He simply tilted slightly, the jab passing harmlessly by his shoulder. The movement was so subtle, it almost appeared accidental. Blackwood frowned, then launched a controlled combination, jab, cross, low kick, executed with textbook precision. Each strike seemed certain to connect with the frail figure. None did. Walter had shifted. Not quickly, not dramatically, just enough that Blackwood's attacks found only empty air. The old man hadn't blocked, hadn't countered, had barely seemed to move at all. Blackwood stepped back, confusion briefly crossing his face. He circled again, more focused now. Interesting evasions, he said, voice losing some of its theatrical quality. But combat isn't just about avoiding hits. Walter remained silent, his breathing unchanged, his posture still stooped, his hands still hanging at his sides. But something had changed. The apparent weakness now seemed less like frailty and more like something being withheld. Irritation flickered across Blackwood's face. He launched forward with greater intent, a rapid sequence of strikes designed to overwhelm. The movements were impressive, technically flawless, built for both effectiveness and demonstration. What happened next stunned the room. Walter's movements shifted from passive to deliberate. His hunched frame straightened, not fully, but enough. His weathered hands, moments ago trembling with age, now moved with surgical precision. He didn't block Blackwood's attacks so much as redirect them, each movement minimal yet devastating in its efficiency. When Blackwood's roundhouse kick came, fast and powerful, Walter simply wasn't there. Then suddenly he was inside Blackwood's guard, one gnarled hand gripping the instructor's wrist, the other pressed against his elbow. A subtle shift of weight, a gentle redirection of momentum, and Blackwood found himself stumbling forward, balance compromised. Mitchell's first principle, Walter spoke for the first time, voice soft but clear, economy of motion. Blackwood recovered quickly, face flushing with embarrassment. He attacked again, more aggressively, abandoning demonstration for dominance. A flurry of strikes, faster, harder, less controlled. Walter remained centered, his movements fluid despite his age. When Blackwood lunged with a powerful straight punch, Walter sidestepped minimally, one hand guiding the strike past him while the other delivered precise palm heel to Blackwood's sternum. The impact wasn't dramatic, but Blackwood staggered back, breath suddenly short. Second principle, position before submission. The audience sat in stunned silence. The frail old man had transformed, not into a warrior of impossible strength, but something more unsettling, a master whose age and apparent weakness were irrelevant. Blackwood attacked again, desperation now evident. He drove forward with everything he had. Speed, strength, technical precision. Walter absorbed the momentum, redirected it, and with a subtle sweeping motion, took Blackwood's feet from under him. The instructor hit the mat with a resounding thud. Walter stood over him, still stooped, still breathing evenly. Third principle. The mind breaks before the body. Blackwood scrambled to his feet, humiliation turning to anger. But now the audience could see what the combat instructor couldn't. He was already defeated, not by superior strength, but by something far more fundamental. Blackwood charged forward with raw aggression, abandoning technique for fury. Walter waited until the last possible moment before moving. A gentle pivot, hands finding pressure points with uncanny precision. Suddenly Blackwood was on his knees, arm locked in a joint manipulation, so subtle, yet so complete that movement became impossible without causing self-injury. The instructor froze, pain evident in his widened eyes. The hold looked almost casual, an old man barely exerting himself. Yet Blackwood was completely immobilized. Walter's voice remained soft, meant for Blackwood, but heard in the silent hall by everyone. Colonel Mitchell taught us that combat is not about domination but resolution, not about showing strength but finding weakness, including our own. He adjusted his grip slightly, causing Blackwood to wince. He taught us that when you fight only to prove yourself, you've already lost the most important battle. Walter released a hold and stepped back. Once again the stooped old veteran, his moment of transformation already fading like a mirage. Blackwood remained kneeling, rubbing his wrist, the swagger gone from his posture. Mitchell never trained us for applause, Walter continued, voice gaining strength despite its quietness. He trained us for what happens when there's no one left to applaud, when you're alone, injured, outnumbered, when technique fails and only principle remains. Blackwood looked up, humiliation burning behind his eyes, but Walter wasn't looking at him anymore. He was addressing everyone. He taught us that true combat effectiveness isn't measured by how impressive you look winning, but by whether you survive when everything goes wrong. Walter's aged eyes swept the room. Those aren't outdated principles. They're timeless ones, paid for in blood by men who never got to grow old like me. The silence that followed wasn't awkward or tense. It was reverent. The lesson wasn't just about combat techniques. It was about something far more fundamental. Walter retrieved his cane. Once again, the frail old man who had entered so unassumingly. He made his way toward the exit, each tap of his cane echoing in the silent hall. No one spoke. No one clapped. The audience simply watched, many standing in spontaneous respect. Blackwood remained on the mat, physically unharmed but utterly defeated. The moderator approached him, offering a hand that was reluctantly accepted. Near the back exit, a young lieutenant in dress uniform intercepted Walter. The young officer hesitated, then snapped to attention, offering a crisp salute that seemed to surprise even himself. "Sir," he said, voice low, "thank you for defending Colonel Mitchell's honor." Walter studied the young man, not returning the salute, but acknowledging it with a slight nod. "I didn't defend his honor, son. His honor was never in question." The lieutenant looked confused. "Then what did you defend in there, sir?" Walter leaned heavily on his cane, suddenly looking every one of his 75 years. "Truth. Not my truth or Blackwood's truth. Just truth." He nodded toward the demonstration area. "The Met doesn't care about reputation or rank. It only knows what works. I've read about Colonel Mitchell's methods, but never seen them applied like that," the lieutenant admitted. "Mitchell never taught techniques," Walter said. "He taught principles. Techniques age. Principles endure." He turned to leave, then added, "Remember, son, Respect is earned not by what you say about yourself, but by what remains when there's nothing left to say. Walter disappeared down the corridor, leaving only the soft tapping of his cane. The video surfaced online within hours. No dramatic edits, no background music, just raw footage of an elderly veteran systematically dismantling the arrogance of a combat instructor half his age. By morning, it had 10 million views. The comments section filled with reflections. He didn't fight to win, he fought to teach. That wasn't about combat, it was about respect. Watch the old man's eyes. He never wanted this fight. Veterans groups shared the video widely. Military instructors studied it frame by frame. The most shared screenshot wasn't the takedown or the joint lock. It was the final image of Walter walking away, hunched over his cane, looking like any other elderly veteran you might pass without noticing. Blackwood issued a public apology 3 days later, acknowledging his disrespect and announcing his intention to research Colonel Mitchell's complete combat philosophy. Walter Coleman gave no interviews, made no statements. When reporters finally located him at his modest home, he simply said, "Some lessons aren't taught with words," before politely closing his door. The incident sparked national conversation about respecting veteran wisdom across generations, about the difference between technique and principle, about judging warriors by their appearance. Perhaps that was the greatest legacy of Walter's quiet demonstration, a reminder that under unassuming exteriors often lie extraordinary spirits, and that true respect isn't given to appearances but to character. What veterans have you misjudged by their appearance? Share your respect in the comments below.